Hi, and welcome to another teaching chat. It's wonderful to be with you again. If you have piano teaching friends that would enjoy these teaching chats and you've been enjoying them, please hit the share button right now because I'd love for more teachers to start seeing these. Today we're going to be chatting about buddy lessons, and I've been talking about this a bit lately because I mentioned it as part of a webinar, just a small part of a webinar, and teachers kind of went a bit mad for it. I got a lot of emails, I got a lot of messages through Facebook, and people just asked me what about all these details about it. What do you do? How do you plan this? What do you charge? All these kind of questions. So I decided to cover it on the blog, and I've written two pretty in-depth posts about it. The first one is the ultimate guide to buddy lesson activities that you can get at colourfulkeys.ie/buddy. And the second one, which was just published on Sunday, is about all these logistical things to do with it. So how do you get the students scheduled? How do you convince parents to switch over? How do you organize the fees? All that kind of stuff, the businessy side of things. And I'll leave a link to that here. That's colourfulkeys.ie/buddy plan. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about today. And if you have more questions as I go through, please write them in. I'd love to clarify this for you because I have simply been loving buddy lessons this year. Before I get any further, let me explain to you what I mean by buddy lessons, because this is not a standard definition term. This is something I sort of invented the name for. I'm sure lots of teachers are doing it though under different names. What I mean by buddy lessons is where a student comes for a certain length of time and one-on-one with you. Then they stay for some other length of time, and then another student comes in that middle bit, and then the second student stays for their solo time. So they get solo time and overlapping time where you have two students at once. It's just a simple way, without scheduling nightmares or switching your whole studio or having a bunch of keyboards, to be able to teach more than one student in your studio at the same time and incorporate tons of other fun stuff and get more time with your students. That's a big part of it for me because it makes your time a little bit more efficient, which means you get to spend more time with everyone. So that's why I do it. Now let me tell you how I do this. So the first decision you need to make is you need to decide about the format. Like I said, some length of time plus some length of time. It really can be anything. It's up to you. It's your business, right? So some of the common ones would be 30 minutes and 30 minutes. I believe that's the most common. And 45 and 15 I've heard as well. What I do is 40 and 20. Now what I mean by that is 40 minutes one-on-one with me, solo time, followed by 20 minutes buddy time. And then you have the second student for their 40-minute solo time. So the total amount of time there is an hour and 40 minutes for the two students. Hope that makes it clear, because I know it's a little bit confusing to talk about these things and think about the overlaps. So that's what I've chosen. Now, why did I choose that? I had so many different factors in my head. Number one, it felt right. 20 minutes of time. I've done quite a few group lessons, off and on, as occasional things, supplemental group lessons. And 20 minutes, I know what that feels like, and it feels good to me. 15 just feels a little bit tight to be able to do a game plus another thing, or to work through a full improvisation and be able to come back to it at the end because I want to be able to revisit something. It just felt too tight. And 30-30, the problem with that for me is there's not enough solo time there, because I would be switching mostly students who had 45 minutes solo lessons to this new 40-20, right? So if I'm cutting them back from 45 minutes to 30, that felt like too big of a jump back for me, and I didn't want to do that. Having said that, you also need to think about the money side of things. Of course you do, and 30-30 has the most overlap, so that's going to be the most economically sensible. It's going to make the most sense money-wise. So if you're doing this for profit reasons, and I think that's totally fine, amongst other things, then you're going to want to think about that too. So 30-30 is going to be the most profitable. And if you're switching from mostly 30-minute lessons, that's going to feel like a dream, like tons of time to spend with your students. But like I said, I was mostly switching from 45. I do have a second option in my studio that is just for preschoolers, and that's 20-20. So they just get the 20 minutes all the time, and that's only for 5 and under. No one older than that should be in those lessons. Maybe a 6-year-old at a push, but that's it. Okay, so that's the lesson format. Then you need to decide on the payment. You have to decide the format first, otherwise you can't calculate the payment. It's not going to work. So you need to know the exact overlap and the solo time. And then the way I do the payment, it's actually very simple, but it's difficult to describe. So again, you're going to want to hop over to the blog for this, colourfulkeys.ie/buddyplan, all one word. And you can get a download there, which is actually going to walk you through this payment process. So that'll make a lot more sense if I'm talking and you're going, what? Then hop on over to the blog because you can get that download and it'll walk you through, input these figures and here's your result, ta-da, okay? But what I do is I take the actual time that the student is going to take from my schedule. Okay, so in the example I shared with you before, I have 40 plus 20 plus 40 for 2 students. Okay, so that's an hour and 40 minutes for 2 students. That means in my actual schedule, each student takes 50 minutes, half of that time. I hope that makes sense. So that's the actual time. Then there's the time the student receives, which is 60 minutes. And I like to split the difference between those two. That's the most fair in my opinion. It makes the most sense. So what I do is I split the difference. So I would charge them for 55 minutes at my regular rate. So if you know your hourly rate, you can take it to 55 minutes and then calculate that over a monthly rate or whatever it is you want to do, semesters, terms, whatever it is. So that's how I work it out. Actual time taken from the schedule, time student is receiving, somewhere in the middle. I think that's a good balance. It's really fair. It's paying you that little bit extra because it is going to take extra time to plan that buddy time, but it's also fair to everyone involved. So make sure you grab the download for that because it makes it super simple. I've given you a chart. You can fill it in, print it out, fill it in, and it'll explain everything to you. So again, that's at colourfulkeys.ie/buddyplan, all one word, and the link is in the comments. If you have questions about that though, and it's not making sense to you, please do write it in the comments because I'd love to hear from you and I'd love to help you if you're thinking about switching to buddy lessons or some other thing like this and you're just not sure where to start. I'd love to help you out with that. Okay, so moving on. We now have our plan. We have our format, we have our payments, and we need to plan the switch. Okay, this is the bit that makes a lot of teachers nervous. So are you going to switch your whole studio or are you going to just give the option? Now, I chose to give the option. There are pros and cons to each of these. Of course there are. If you switch your whole studio, it's going to make your scheduling make a lot more sense, be a lot easier, and it's just going to be so much better for you. But parents might feel a bit pushed into it and you might lose some people. It just might happen. If you're happy with that, fine. Go for it. I think that's fine. But I didn't want to pull the rug out from under students who specifically wanted those one-on-one lessons. Okay? I've students with special needs and I've just some students who I know would just prefer that environment and they found me and they'd had tried to other teachers before and they finally fit in somewhere and I don't want to take that away from them. So I chose to give them the option. But if you're going to do it my way, give them the option. Fantastic. Pick a starting point and then start to educate. Talk it up to your students. That's really important. So they're excited. They know why this is fun and it's going to be great. If students are on board, their parents are going to be happy about it too. Then formally introduce it to the parents. Explain it as clearly, concisely, and friendly as you can. Because your parent, you always have to think about it from this perspective. Don't write it like you're talking to me because you're not, okay? Your piano parents might not know anything about music. They might be nervous about this environment. They don't understand how it works. Even if they've been through it, they might be stuck in the traditional model. So explain it as clearly as you can. Make sure you make it clear why it's good for them, not you. Never talk about it for you, talk about it for them, and make it super, super crystal clear why they would want to switch their child over to this system. And then recommend the option that you recommend for this student. Be genuine about it. If you think that student would do better in private lessons, still explain the new option and why it's appearing on the schedule and say, I think Susie would still be better in 45 minutes for this reason, that reason, and the other reason. That's it. If buddy lessons are the best option, which I believe they are for most students, they are for a lot of my students, then I recommend that to them, and I recommend which time it is, and they're allowed to come back to me and say, no, that's absolutely fine. That happens, but very rarely. If I recommend it in this way, clearly explain the benefits, they're usually on board because they understand that I have their child's best interests at heart, and I'm just trying to provide a great piano lesson experience for them. Okay, final point. This is a big one today, is about scheduling, because I get this a lot. So in my studio, when I decided to make the switch, I decided right away I was going to be okay with mismatched buddies. Meaning, if I have to have a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old, I wrote out, before I made this decision, I wrote out a list of activities that I could do with those two students together that would be beneficial and I still think would be worth it for them coming for that buddy lesson time. And since I genuinely believe that that is still valuable, I'm happy to go ahead with that. So my buddies are not all matched perfectly. Now, it is great if you can get 2 7-year-old beginners together and 2 12-year-olds who are exactly grade 3 level, but you won't always be able to. And if that's your goal, you're going to have less piano buddies, or you really need to go on the whole studio end of things. It's going to be even harder if you have that mix still with 30 minutes and 45 minutes and an hour and this type of buddy lesson and partner lessons and all this stuff like I have. You're going to have even more trouble if you can't have mismatched buddies in terms of level or age. If you are going to go for one or the other, if you can either match by age or by level, I would always go age. Absolutely 100,000%. Always go with age first and level second whenever I'm planning any group things. Another reason you might want to be okay with mismatched buddies is because siblings come to your studio. And how much better is it for a parent if they can come in and leave their 2 children or 3 children there and go away and do the shopping for an hour and a half rather than 30 minutes and 30 minutes like they've had before. So it makes a massive difference for them, and that's worth it to me because I want to be on their side, right? So when you're going to be scheduling these students, make sure your enrollment form has opt-out scheduling. That's just a little thing that makes a big difference. Don't ask on the form which times are you available. Ask which times are you not available and get them to cross out every single time during the week that they are not available. It really makes a big difference to how many options are open to you when you're making this schedule. And I promise it is possible. I scheduled all my students into my 6 days a week of teaching with these new buddy systems, and it's been fantastic. I've been doing this since September, and it's wonderful. It's one of the best changes I've made recently. So if you want to get more details about this, go to colourfulkeys.ie/buddyplan or ask me a question in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. And while you're here, make sure you subscribe so you get the next one of these videos as soon as they go live. Okay, happy Tuesday. Bye for now.